special city council meeting for the month of November 2019. Please come to order. Everybody silence their cell phones, please. Paul, would you like to lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Nancy?
Jerry Lynn,
Here.
Paul Muse,
Here.
Louis Short,
Here.
Jim Lay,
Here.
Chris Foster, Casey Griffin, here. Paula Thorne,
Present.
Sharon Williams,
Present.
Allie Sugg. Press.
She should be here shortly. Let the record show we have a quorum. The item on the agenda is an ordinance calling for a special election on the question of approval or rejection of the City of Heber Springs, Arkansas, ordinance number 2019-08, approved the 25th day of July 2019. We're following the judge's orders, and we're pleased to put this in the voters' hands, and here we're here to have an ordinance on this special election. Counselor, would you like to give any, you want us to read the ordinance
Well,
prior to?
I'll preface my statement with the fact that naturally in any decision by court, you have two choices. One, to accept the judgment. Two, to appeal that judgment. Judge pointed that out. Both sides have the right to appeal. I've said, and I don't think that we would be successful in appeal. I disagree with some parts of the judge's order, but I had the utmost respect for Judge Myers. And there were 4 areas that she based her ruling on. One of them being the fact that there are rates in the ordinance, and rate ordinances are always subject to referendum. The other thing I will point out is she disagreed with my interpretation on the ordinance as far as the franchise. She considered it to be a new franchise. So each time the city approves a franchise like this, every 5 years or 2, ever how long you set it, it's always going to be subject to referendum, just so you're aware of that. So with that said, I have prepared an ordinance that I would be glad to discuss any parts of it before we move forward with it, if there are any questions, but I believe it is in compliance with the law. And basically what it does, it calls for a special election on January the 14th. How did we arrive at January 14th? The Arkansas law says it's got to be held on the second Tuesday of any month. Arkansas law also says it should be 60 days from the date that you file with the clerk the request for the election. And that turned out to be the soonest possible date was January the 14th. And I guess at this point I need somebody to, I'll be glad to read the ordinance if somebody will move to introduce the ordinance.
I move that you read the ordinance.
Okay. Ordinance number 2019. An ordinance calling for a special election on the question of approval or rejection of City of Heber Springs, Arkansas. Ordinance number 2019-08, approved the 25th day of July 2019, and prescribing other matters pertaining thereto. Whereas the City Council of the City of Heber Springs passed ordinance number 2019-08 on July 25th, 2019, and whereas a referendum petition was filed with City Clerk requesting that ordinance number 2019-08 be referred to the legal voters of the city to the end that the same may be approved or rejected, and whereas the City Clerk certified that the petition contained the requisite number of petitioners, and whereas the purpose of this ordinance is to call a special election on the approval or rejection of the ordinance number 2019-08. Excuse me. Now therefore be it ordained by the City Council of the City of Heber Springs, Arkansas as follows. Section 1. That there be and there is hereby called a special election to be held on January 14th, 2020 at which election there shall be submitted to the electors of the city the question of the repeal of Heber Springs Ordinance Number 2019-08. Section 2, pursuant to Arkansas Code Section 14-55-303A2, the question shall be placed on the ballot for the election in substantially the following form. Title of Ordinance Number 2019-08. An ordinance awarding an exclusive franchise for the business of transporting persons within the city of Heber Springs by motor ambulance for compensation, providing for approval of rate schedules and for other purposes. 4, repeal of ordinance number 2019-08, against repeal of ordinance number 2019-08. Section 3, pursuant to Arkansas Code Section 7-11-2042, the full text of ordinance number 2019-08 is as follows. Ordinance number 2019-08, an ordinance awarding an exclusive franchise for the business of transporting persons within the city of Heber Springs by motor ambulance for compensation, providing for approval of rate schedules and for other purposes. Whereas the City Council of the City of Heber Springs has previously passed ordinance number 94-3 declaring the business of transporting persons within the city of Heber Springs by motor ambulance, whether by the providing of medical transfer services, including the operation of a motor ambulance, and the same is hereby declared to be a necessary public utility, service subject to regulations and franchising by the city, and whereas applications have been received and reviewed by the City Council, and whereas a public hearing was scheduled and conducted after notice thereof was given to each applicant and to the citizens of the city, and whereas ordinance number 94-3 provides that the City Council may grant an exclusive franchise for the privilege of using the streets, alleys, public ways, and public grounds of said city for the purpose of operating an ambulance business for the inhabitants of and all other persons within said city, including emergency ambulance service. Now therefore be it ordained by the City Council of the City of Heber Springs, Arkansas as follows. Section 1. The City Council hereby finds and determines that the granting of an exclusive franchise for the privilege of using the streets, alleys, public ways, and public grounds of said city for the purpose of operating an ambulance business for the inhabitants of and all other persons within said city, including emergency ambulance services, is desirable, necessary, and in the best interest of the citizens and inhabitants of the city. Section 2. The City Council hereby finds and determines that Survival Flight, Inc. should be and is hereby granted such an exclusive franchise to be effective and beginning November 15, 2019. Section 3. The requirements of ordinance number 94-3 shall apply, and Survival Flight, Inc. shall comply with all the requirements and any amendments thereof, the requirements of this ordinance, and also with the standards, rules, regulations, and requirements established by the state of Arkansas. Section 4. The application of Survival Flight, Inc. and all materials submitted and attached thereto are incorporated herein by reference. Section 5. The rates submitted in the application of Survival Flight, Inc. are hereby approved. Survival Flight, Inc. shall charge such rates so set by this ordinance. Rates will be reviewed and revised periodically as determined by the City Council. Section 6. The franchise granted herein shall be for a period of 5 years and may be renewed upon review and approval by the City Council for additional periods not to exceed 5 years. Section 7. All ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith are hereby repealed to the extent of such conflict. Section 8. In the event any subsection, section, or part of this ordinance later ruled to be invalid, the other provisions of this ordinance shall remain in force and effect. Passed and approved this 25th day of July, 2019. Jimmy Clark, Mayor, attest. Nancy Hurley, City Clerk. Section 4. Pursuant to Arkansas Code Section 7-11-203, a copy of this ordinance shall be promptly filed with the County Clerk, Cleveland County, Arkansas. Section 5. In the event any subsection, section, or part of this ordinance is later ruled to be invalid, the other provisions of this ordinance shall remain in full force and effect. Passed and approved this blank day of November 2019.
Okay.
2019-09.
Yeah, if there's any discussion, we need somebody to...
Any discussion? Council?
I
Move
have
for the-
some questions.
Okay.
Excuse me. On January 14th, where will the election be held?
I believe it's gonna be held here at City Hall and at the Community Center.
Okay,
It's just gonna be a one-day thing.
Yes.
No, there will be early voting.
No, that's right, there will be early
There will be-
voting, 6 days
I
prior to.
think Jill said 5 or 6 days of early
14th,
voting, plus
yeah.
that day will be 2 locations, and I think they're still trying to decide if it's gonna be paper or electronic.
Yeah.
They've made that
They
decision.
talked about paper just for the cost of it, but that's to be determined.
It's a whole lot easier to do the paper than to go through all the printing and all the programming of all the electronic machines.
Now, early voting, I assume, will be at the courthouse.
It's always at the courthouse.
so the election, we've already talked with the Election Commission, and right now, tentatively, January 14th is when the election will be. 6 days prior to that,
It'll be early.
early voting.
Yes.
Okay. Just for clarification.
Any other discussion? Comments?
Well, I have a question about, I have no question about this particular ordinance. I understand it, I know why we have to have it observed. But once this is passed, it has, this is a question for Terry. Once this is passed, what happens to the ordinance taking effect Friday for the changeover of the ambulance services? Terry, the reason I ask, because Article 5 states, any measure referred to the people by referendum petition shall remain in abeyance until such vote is taken.
I think that's talking about county, but I will tell you, the judge, that was in the hearing the other day, that was raised by, that the judge stayed that, and the judge would not stay that. And matter of fact,
She didn't specify that.
yeah, well, she did in her ruling, I think, they'd asked for a stay, and she said they didn't submit sufficient irreparable harm, so, and I was wrong, quite honestly, I thought it did too, what you're talking about.
Well, that's what I thought too.
Yeah, but Judge said, no, that wasn't correct. You-
The only case we could find, or could be found, was the case in Pine Bluff. We would have found the end case, because it's the exact same situation happened
Yeah.
today.
But the judge was clear on that, and Mr. White, matter of fact, agreed with her.
So then, the other ambulance service takes over Friday. When this goes to the vote January 14th, if that's overturned, then they would be out of business, and that day we would have no ambulance service.
That's right. That's right.
So then at that point, what would happen?
Well, I would assume, I mean, that would be up to the council as what happens, because the question is franchise. The question is not who is doing the service. The question, that's what I gathered from the judge. The question is whether or not you have a franchise in the city. In other words, who did the service was just a part of the ordinance, but what the Constitution says is a franchise is subject to referendum. Doesn't matter who's doing it, it's the franchise that's subject to referendum. So as I understand this, let's say on January the 14th, the vote is for repeal of the ordinance. Okay, so you'd have to vote for repeal of the ordinance for it to be repealed. Once it's repealed, then you would have no one providing that service. It would come back to, I guess, the city council, as I understand, because of our franchise ordinance that says that you take applications and the city council decides who's to get that, and then that would be subject to a referendum again.
Okay, so maybe January 1st, just to cover our behinds, should we start working on that, just in case? Because we owe the people ambulance service.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, that's a.
I mean,
that's a call
I'm
for
new
the
to all
ci-
this, and
Right.
I'm trying to cover bases so that there isn't any gap in between, you know, service. But
Well,
I
I
don't know
think-
if we can do that.
I think no one wants a gap between service.
So as our attorney, what are our options? I mean,
Well, I wish I had a simple answer for you.
okay,
I don't have a simple answer for you. As I understand it, if on January the 14th, the ordinance that was passed back in July is repealed, then basically no one has the right to operate an ambulance franchise in the city of Heber Springs, which is what you folks voted on in July.
Right.
So if you look at our ordinance, the franchise ordinance, what it says is you take applications, which is what you did, and the city council decides who's to get that. So I suppose theoretically, if the city council were to vote the same way, we could go through all this again. I mean, I don't know. But the vote is to whether or not you're gonna have a franchise. You understand the vote is the exclusive franchise.
right, not who has.
So I guess the person might also make the argument that, okay, there's no longer a franchise and anybody that wants to could operate. You know, that's another avenue, if you thought that was best for your citizens.
Well, I think whatever happens, council needs to do their due diligence and see what goes on.
Well,
Is January 1st early enough to put that out to bid or whatever?
I don't know how you're gonna pass a law that may or may not take effect,
Right,
so.
Terry, when we passed the franchise for North Star all in the past,
Mhm.
where we didn't have a referendum then, how was that different all the times we really
Well, it could have
did?
been. It could have
It could
been.
have
According to
been.
what according to the judge's ruling, each time you did that, it could have been subject to referendum. So it's just that it was
Just that
never,
no
no
one
one
did.
ever did that.
Okay.
and if there was an emergency clause, could we temporarily put somebody in there until we get this
Well,
resolved?
let me tell you about the Constitution. The Constitution says you can't have an emergency clause in a franchise.
Okay,
So, you know, there's some interesting issues in this. There's no question about it. So, I don't know.
okay.
Anything else?
Anything else?
Done.
Okay.
Mayor, may I ask a question? I would like to know what's gonna happen on Friday. That is the day, this Friday, the 14th, North Star is supposed to be gone, right? So are they continue, or is Survival Flight gonna fill in till the election? I'm not clear on that.
Survival Flight will fill in until the election, isn't that correct?
Now, on Friday, this ordinance has not been stayed. What the election about is whether or not to repeal, and to repeal something that has to be in effect. So the ordinance that was passed is in effect. It's a law granting the franchise on Friday. So Survival Flight would be the provider Friday. After that, depending on the outcome of the election, if the voters reject the repeal of the ordinance, then we just keep on going. Everything's in place. If they vote to vote for a repeal of the ordinance, it's that point that we're not going to have anybody providing that service, having an exclusive right to provide that service. And again, I suppose that you could theoretically just open it up and let anybody wanted to operate.
After the election.
Well, I mean, that's something the council's gonna have to
Yeah.
decide, because in the city's ambulance franchise code, it is a criminal offense to operate an emergency land-based ambulance system in the city without a franchise. So you can see what's going on here.
Okay, thank you.
I think we need somebody to move for the adoption if we want
Yeah.
to move this thing forward.
Yeah, I'm gonna move, we adopt it.
Second.
I have a question. If this does not pass, would the city not be in contempt of court? Because she specifically ordered that we refer this to a special election?
Well, we wouldn't be following the judge's order after.
We'd be in
I mean, you
contempt
got
of
an
court.
argument that you got 30 days to appeal, but that's the reason I did this and got it done so we could get this done. I mean, I don't see any reason not to go forward with the judge's order. That's the reason I prepared this ordinance and
Right.
we're
Because
sitting here.
if we're in contempt of court, who's gonna go to jail, you or Jimmy?
Well,
You are.
it wouldn't
You got a different color
be me.
Also, it'd be Jimmy. Well,
It would be the council, I suppose.
You forgot about tort immunity.
Yeah, but that's not gonna happen, I mean, you know.
No.
I'll make a second.
Yeah.
Nancy?
Chris Foster,
Yes.
Casey Griffin,
Yes.
Louis Short,
Yes.
Sharon Williams,
Yes.
Paul Muse,
yes.
Paula Sporn,
Yes.
Jim Lay,
Yes?
Ally Sutton.
Yes.
All right, we'll need to make sure we get it to the county clerk in the morning, tomorrow, a copy of this ordinance. And then everything will flow from there, I assume.
And motion carried. Okay, do we have a motion to
Motion
adjourn?
to adjourn.
Second, third.